The world looks to California to answer the hard questions, for redemption, to introduce the unfamiliar, to be resilient. Because California bounces back, holds us accountable, values who we are, remains vigilant, defies those in our way, and stands for community. Here on the West Coast, we're at the center of it all. Los Angeles Times, the state of what's next.
Good evening. I'm Justin Chang, film critic for the Los Angeles Times, and I'd like to welcome you to week 6 of the Ultimate Summer Movies Showdown, the LA Times series where you get to choose the greatest summer movies of all time. With theaters closed and major Hollywood releases being held back due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my Times colleagues and I asked ourselves, what if instead of having the worst summer movie season ever, we came up with the ultimate summer movie season, singling out the best movies from each week of release going back to 1975, the summer of Jaws. So here's how it works. Each week for 16 weeks, we are compiling some of those best or most memorable big movies from each week of release, and we are letting all of you vote for your favorites in a series of head-to-head contests posted on my Twitter account at Justin C. Chang. The winner each week will be the subject of a retrospective piece in the Times and of a virtual discussion like this one. Thank you to all of our readers who have voted and who have shared their favorite movies so far. Just to recap, our previous winners are The Avengers, Bridesmaids, Mad Max Fury Road, Alien, and Finding Nemo. And this week, we are talking about Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg's 1993 blockbuster adapted from the best-selling novel by Michael Crichton. It beat out some stiff competition, including another Spielberg movie, E.T., and while some of you may disagree about which is the better film, I don't think anyone can disagree that Jurassic Park is absolutely one of the ultimate summer movies. We're very fortunate to be joined tonight by the movie's Dinosaur supervisor, Phil Tippett, who had an enormous role in shaping the visceral impact of this movie and many of your other favorite movies as well. We'll bring Phil on in a bit, but first, a few words on Jurassic Park. First off, it's remarkable that the movie we're looking back at this week is presently the #1 movie at the quote-unquote box office this week due to its return to theaters, most of them, fortunately, drive-in theaters. It's hard to underestimate the enormous cultural and commercial impact that the film had back in the summer of 1993, but to sum it up, let's watch this clip, which I'm sure all of you remember.
Alan, this species of variformin's been extinct since the Cretaceous period. I mean, this thing isn't one of this thing. Why?
It's a dinosaur.
Those were, of course, the actors Sam Neill and Laura Dern, who starred alongside Jeff Goldblum and Richard Attenborough, but all of them, of course, were understandably upstaged by a remarkable cast of velociraptors and brachiosauruses, or brachiosauri, whatever it is, and other dinosaurs, including one terrifying T-Rex. Jurassic Park premiered June 11th, 1993, and was an immediate smash hit. It grossed more than $1 billion worldwide. It spawned multiple sequels, including The Lost World, Jurassic Park 3, Jurassic World, and most recently, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, all of which were also tremendously successful, though it's safe to say none of them have quite recaptured the enduring appeal and magic of the original. Jurassic Park was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and won all 3: Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects. And we are pleased and fortunate to be joined tonight by one of those Oscar-winning visual effects masters, Phil Tippett, who served as dinosaur supervisor on Jurassic Park, is a giant in the world of creature design, stop motion, and computerized character animation. His more than 4 decades in the industry have seen him work closely with Industrial Light and Magic and DreamWorks, as well as his own company, Tippett Studio. His groundbreaking work can be seen in films as different as Dragon Slayer, The Twilight Saga, and Starship Troopers. He has also worked on several movies that have been or will be featured in the ultimate summer movie Showdown, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, RoboCop, and of course, the original trilogy of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, which earned him his first Oscar. And we're so pleased to have him here to talk about Jurassic Park tonight. Phil Tippett, welcome to the ultimate summer movie Showdown, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Good to be here.
This is a very weird moment, of course, as I always do, just with all our guests. How are you doing right now? How is COVID life treating you at the moment?
It really hasn't changed my life that much because I'm pretty much, like a Garrett type mentality, where I just work on my own stuff and develop my own stuff, so I just go hide out. And I've got a workspace at the back of my house that I do things in, and I just do that. And so it's not problematic for me at all. I just stay away from people and exercise more. And unfortunately, drank a cup of coffee this morning that my wife made that was too strong, and had an anxiety attack, and thought apocalyptic thoughts, and now I'm better.
Glad you're better, and glad you're getting the time to just hunker in the bunker and get work done. There's so much to talk about. I want to start, earlier and then come back to Jurassic Park, because your career has over 4 decades encompassed more than 4 decades of innovation in visual effects and creature effects. Can you just start by telling us about your love of stop motion, your love of monsters, and how it started, and maybe related? Can you talk about the work of Ray Harryhausen, the godfather of this field, and what it meant to you?
Yeah, well, it really was the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad in 1958. I was like 7 years old, that I pestered my parents to take me to see. Um, I'd seen it on TV, and I remember even telling them at the time, I liked the magic of the weird stuff because it moves funny, and I have no idea what that was. And so they took me to the Oaks Theater on Solano Boulevard in Berkeley, and that's where everything changed for me. And you can say that for like a number of visual effects craftspeople. Ray Harryhausen's Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was like this lightning bolt that just came down and just reorganized all the molecules in your body, and years to figure out what it was that I saw, and what it was magic. And that's one of the things I think one retains when they're doing this kind of work, is that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for Jurassic Park 4 or whatever the next sequel is. You're looking for the first thing or the next thing or the most amazing thing that's magic to you. And that's what you want to work on, and that's hopefully what you can help create.
And is it hard to do that, just given so many changes and I guess you call them advances in the technology? Is it hard to hold on to that magic and try to replicate it? Is that part of the challenge, trying to find it, even if the medium, even if the tools have changed?
No, it's not that much. I mean, it's a pain, and it's always like a readjustment. But the path is really clear, and there are certain things that one has to do, whatever the technology is, in terms of mounting a production, in pre-production, in production, and post-production, and so all of that is the same. And then the tools change, and you got to adjust the tools and relearn how to do things, and that can be challenging. And but that's the way it is.
Yeah. The first Hollywood movie you worked on, I believe, was Star Wars, a little movie called Star Wars. You were responsible for, among other things, some of the faces we see in the famous Cantina sequence, and you also played one of them. What was it like working on that? And just as one of your earliest assignments, did you know that it was going to be the sensation that it became?
Well, all of us in my little world at the time, the only work that we could find was doing television commercials. So we worked in Hollywood at the corner of Stewart and Romaine, at a place called Cascade Pictures of California, doing the Pillsbury Doughboy and Jolly Green Giant and things like that. And so that was kind of our graduate school. I mean, we had been doing all this stuff in our garages for years as like teenagers, shooting 8mm and 16mm stuff. And then, got to work professionally at a really, really great place with a really great, boss who's So we learned a lot of stuff. You just burn through like all kinds of different techniques and met all kinds of, it was like, it was a dream come true, because what we all wanted to do was to be a part of what we fantasized as the movie milieu of the 20s and 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and there we were in the same buildings that so much great stuff was made, and working with people I worked alongside with Tex Avery. I'd go out and smoke cigarettes with Tex, and he'd like teach me tricks about how to read a dummy sheet for animation and stuff like that. So it was just like pig heaven. It was just the most amazing opportunity. And from there, my buddy Dennis Murin got the job as a camera man on Star Wars, and that just started the ball rolling. From there, one thing led to the next, and George needed some stuff. He didn't like how the cantina scene was shot. He felt that, I guess, that they didn't have the money and the budget to do what he had hoped for. And Stuart Freeborn, the makeup artist, just had to buy stuff from that was like Beatrix Potter, like the Rat Man or the Alligator Man or whatever. But George wanted space aliens, so he was able to talk Fox out of the money to put together this little renegade unit under the auspice of makeup artist Rick Baker, who hired his out-of-work stop-motion friends. There were about 4 of us, and so we made as many space alien masks as we could in about 6 weeks, and went on a little insert stage on Brea Avenue, and George directed, and Carol Ballard was the DP. And during that time, George noticed that on a shelf I had brought in a stop motion puppet that I made a few years earlier when I was a teenager. And that gave him the idea to do the chess set as a stop motion piece, because Michael Crichton had just come out with Future World, and in that there was a holographic chess scene with live actors. And previously George was going to do it with just put the creature masks that we made on and shoot those against black and composite them into the shot. But with the 2 weeks remaining in the schedule before the movie's release, he asked me and my partner John Berg if we could make a dozen space aliens stop motion and shoot it, and we did. So we made them like really quickly over the course of a few weeks, and then went into ILM, and Dennis lit the shot, and we shot it over 3 nights. Right, the very last shot that we did was when they were having the wrap party at ILM. So we were surrounded by black flats, and people were like whipping it up and drinking beer and whatnot, and that was that. And then we went to the cast and crew screening that George invited us all to, and we're all blown away. I mean, George had always showed us the scenes that we were going to be working in, and it was what we'd always wanted to do. And working on TV commercials was moderately interesting and a great education, but we wanted to work on movies and sci-fi and horror and fantasy type stuff. This was the big opportunity, and we were all blown away. From frame 1 to the end of the movie, we were all shocked.
And of course, and then a few years later with Empire Strikes Back, where you designed, among other things, the Tauntauns and the Imperial Walkers, which it's interesting to talk about with regard to Jurassic Park, because they have dinosaur-like characteristics. Do you look back on it? I mean, I know they're obviously such different projects, but another step in sort of the evolution of dinosaurs and dinosaur-like creatures on screen. Did that give you ideas that you later put into play?
That was all part of a process, some of which I was not a part of. That was primarily Dennis Mirren and Joe Johnson, the visual effects art director, working with George in the very early stages of pre-production, coming up with the Imperial snow walkers and what those would be. And they were going to be a number of different things. At one point, they were going to be tanks, Norwegian army tanks that were retrofit, but that was too lame. And then it was going to be radio-controlled vehicles. But I think between Dennis and Joe Johnson, they convinced them to make these kind of dinosaur-like Imperial snow walkers. And then George had asked me to design a tauntaun, and so I spent like a day or two doing like a dozen sketches, and I sent it to him, and he picked one. He said, "Can you make a three-dimensional maquette of that?" And I did, and I sent it to him. He said, "Okay, well, that's a tauntaun." And then one thing after the next, just kept moving forward.
Yeah. And let's jump ahead, I guess, to Jurassic Park. I know people were waiting long enough, and just talk about getting the call to work on that picture. I know you had just wrapped up RoboCop, I believe. Can you just how did you become involved with that? I know you had done, you had done Dinosaur, the animated documentary. You had done Prehistoric Beasts, so you were obviously versed in the visuals of this. But how did you become attached to that and working with Spielberg?
Well, anecdotally, I found out afterwards that Spielberg was trying to frame how to move forward with the project. He was talking to George, and George said, "Phil's the guy you need to talk to," because I had kind of one foot in the paleontological background. I was like kind of a super amateur paleontologist since I was a kid. So I knew everything about the latest theories, paleontological theories, but I also knew production. I knew how to, take something from the cradle to the grave in a theatrical motion picture. And so I was this, the right guy at the right time to step into this position. So Kathy Kennedy, the producer, called me up. And at that point in time, she was saying, that Stephen had seen these animatronic or kind of balloon type things in Orlando, Florida, and he wanted to shoot all that stuff with full-size dinosaurs on the set, and I told Kathy, it was like, that ain't gonna happen, that the technology does not exist. And she was like, well, why not? It's like, because to make a movie and all the moving parts that you need for that, you're not going to be able to use something that's good as you're riding by something for like 12 seconds to sustain it, over all the different tricks and hoops that you have to jump through. And it's the same thing as like, just wishing that you could have a golf course on the moon, because it ain't gonna happen. It's a bad idea, and plus you can't do it. And so there was like a year that went on. She sent me the Galleys to Crichton's book, which had not been published at that time.
Right.
And gradually we started thinking about how to do it more conventionally, using stop motion and go motion and high-speed photography, until the edict came down and ILM had proved that you could make a living, breathing creature using computer graphics. And then that's the way it was done.
Yeah. The movie feels and felt like such a watershed then because of that bridge that you just described, or that transition, because it was going to be stop motion, and then Spielberg decided to go with CG. I imagine that must have been such a jarring, change of plan. And you, of course, adapted, evolved, and served as Dinosaur supervisor, supervising the animation of these now computer-generated dinosaurs. What was it like for you and your headspace in that moment of just that complete paradigm shift in the technology on that movie? can't
Oh,
have been
well, it
easy.
was catastrophic. I mean, I think I was my own worst enemy, because I'm friends with Dennis Murin, and he kept me abreast of the technology that they were developing through Young Sherlock and The Abyss and Terminator. And when it became very clear, that they had figured out how to do living and breathing, animals, the game was over for me. And I got really sick. I emotionally got ruined. I got pneumonia. I had to stay in bed for 2 or 3 weeks, and but I hadn't put things together. I didn't understand or appreciate the stuff that I knew, and I just knew a lot of stuff. I knew about dinosaurs, so I could help develop a script with Stephen and David Kapp, and I knew the production process, and so I just knew more than computer graphics guys did. And I would walk into a room and see people with a mouse and a keyboard doing stuff, and my life had been all about being on the stage with lights and Apple boxes and whatnot. And now it was just sitting in front of a computer, typing stuff out, which seemed, like a really boring job to me. But I didn't have to do that. I was put in the position of essentially, when we went into it, Stephen said, you will be the director, Dinosaur soup director of the show. And then they tried to do that, and the MPA said, man, there's only one director on the show. So, and then Stephen was also, by that time, he'd like put it all together about the significance of the accomplishments of the computer graphics work, and realized that it was magic. And he kind of did the same sort of thing that Ray Harryhausen did back in the day with coming up with a name like Ray did for his process, which was called Dynamation, which was actually a very, very simple, straightforward process. But Stephen really wanted the public knowledge to not focus on the technology and go in that direction with publicity, and to focus on, Stan Winston makes dinosaurs, Phil Tippett supervises dinosaurs, Dennis Murin is a visual effects supervisor, blah, blah, blah. So it keeps everything more imaginary, which was certainly a smart thing to do, because everybody's just so into technology. So once you start talking about that, then you just veer off into that lane.
Yeah, it's sort of essential to preserving some element of mystery, right? I mean, which I know Spielberg is, of course, a master of doing. So
yeah, some magic. Yeah. It's just like old George Millay, same thing.
Given your extensive paleontological knowledge and the research that you did, did it also help the things that we didn't know? I mean, did you have a fair amount of creative license in terms of how they should look, and was that freeing in some ways, just being able to interpret?
Well, all the George Lucas's and Steven Spielberg's and Paul Verhoeven are incredibly inclusive, and what they really want. I mean, if you're making a movie with a bunch of space aliens or dinosaurs or arachnid bugs, it's as Paul would say, it's the relationship is similar to the director being a conductor of a symphony orchestra and you being the first violinist, because it's about the bugs or the dinosaurs or whatever. So you are shored up with what you do by the producers and the director, just make sure that you get everything that you need to do your job the best you can. And so that's what it is. I mean, it's really like a little bit like a bunch of kids getting together and like our gang coming up with a play, and it's like, what can we do? And so in the initial storyboard story meetings with David Kep, I would suggest different dinosaurs for some of the things that Crichton had in his book that would kind of up the dramatic feel of things or behavior or whatever that looked fine on the page, but to translate that onto the screen, it's not going to work so great because the duck-billed dinosaurs are going to waddle like ducks and look funny, but we should get this other Gallimimus dinosaur that could probably get up to 50 or 60 miles an hour for a stampede scene, so it'll be more exciting, or swap out the brontosaurus in the opening scene with a much bigger creature called the Ultrasaurus or a Brachiosaurus, which was just huge, just massive, and just to do whatever you could to kind of goose the spectacle quotient of the thing.
And we played, of course, that earlier scene at the top of the show when we first see the dinosaurs, and it is such a jaw-dropping first introduction that Steven Spielberg, it seems, he even lingers on Sam Neill's face and Laura Dern's face longer than he would ordinarily for those in similar scenes of wonderment as we see throughout his movies. Just can you talk about just deciding on the scale of that scene? Which dinosaurs would be included, because that's the moment that really tells us what we're in for, and I imagine just so much planning must have gone into it.
Yeah, that was the Brachiosaurus scene. And so one of the things that we do for these kinds of things, when we go out on location to shoot, we bring along these props that we call monster sticks. And Stephen was very the monsters to be animals. And so he wanted everything to be paleontologically correct. So we got these poles that are marked off every foot that are like whatever 30 feet tall, and then there's like a piece of rope that's taped off with like glow in the dark tape every foot, and that's stretched out for 50 or 60 feet, and that's placed in the scene. And so that allows Dean Cundy, the DP, to frame the shot knowing how big the character is going to be. And so we shot all that stuff using that technique, and then we got back and started putting the dinosaur in at the proper scale, and it just was too small. I mean, even though we did the right thing, because of the landscape just ate the creature, and the giant dinosaur looked like a pig. It just looked like stupid, and so we would make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it felt right. And that's exactly what they did in the Schoensack Cooper production of King Kong. You look at that movie, and the scale of King Kong is all over the place. It's just King Kong is as big as he needs to be for the scene that he's in. Sometimes he's 50 feet tall, sometimes he's 20 feet tall. And, that just doesn't register because dramatically that's, not your focus.
Of course, in planning all this, I know so much time and effort and research goes into the pre-production, the storyboarding, the blocking and everything. But it also sounds like, to the degree you can improvise, there's so much that needs to change in the moment. Would that be correct? Fair to say that it's a balance of rigorous planning, but also
all the time. And that on Jurassic happened all the time. I mean, the scene just before the stampede with Gallimimus hadn't totally been resolved yet. It was kind of sketched out on the page, but it wasn't there. And Stephen had spent the morning shooting a number of different approaches, and he wasn't happy with that. And the opportunity comes up, and you go, and this is the way we work together a lot, is like with directors or any member of the crew, is you say, hey, I have an idea. What if Joey Mazzello and Dr. Grant are looking at the stampede of the Gallimimus coming in, And as is indicated in the script, it validates Dr. Grant's theories that dinosaurs are birds, and he says they're birds. They're flocking. They're doing what I had theorized, and then the gallimimuses turn and start coming towards the guys, and I said, what if Joey Mazzello, and Dr. Grant says they're flocking. That's what he should say. That was not in the script. And Joey Mazzello says, I think we're going to get flocked. And as the things are coming right at him, and Steven said, I can't put that in one of my movies. So he changed it to Joey Mazzello saying, I think they're flocking this way. So stuff like that happens, quite frequently. We were shooting the Tyrannosaurus scene where he takes out the outhouse that the lawyer's in, and in the storyboards and in the budget, the Tyrannosaurus was just going to be kind of like a freight train, just blasting through the thing, and the lawyer later. But you were shooting the scene on the stage of Warner Brothers, and I said, hey, you know what, Steven, we should do? We should have the Tyrannosaurus eat the guy. And he went, yeah, we have to have the Tyrannosaurus eat the guy. And the producers were going like, that's not in the budget. And it was like, hey, it's no big deal. All you have to do is tilt the camera up for one take. Just tilt the camera up. And if you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it, knowing full well that Steven was going to figure out a way of using it, because that's the shot you need in that movie. And so we shot it, and it was in the movie. And I guess what they did was they repurposed ILM repurposed the Terminator 2, whatever it was, liquid guy, and put some,
right,
clothes on it. Did it that way. Made it fit in the budget.
The legs dangling from the T-Rex's mouth. The movie would not be the same without that. Rewatching it the other night, I mean, I even just on my TV, still a really scary movie that had me jumping in all the right places, and and of course, all done within a PG-13 rating. And this was a movie that a lot of families saw. But was it tricky balancing that, just making it scary, but not going, it's not Jaws, but it's definitely it's scary enough. I mean, was it a concern?
Well, I mean, we ran into some snags that had to be adjusted along the way. I mean, one of the things in Crichton's book was that the Tyrannosaur picks up the Jeep or whatever it is, like Zilla, and shakes it. It's like, that's never going to happen in a million years if you want this to be like a real dinosaur, because the car weighs almost as much as the dinosaur. So what if, again, we try and do something behavioral with that? Let's have the Tyrannosaur turn the Jeep over as though he was trying to get to the underbelly of a herbivorous dinosaur and gut it. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, that works. That's perfect. And then then we could have him, not be able to get at the kids, and then he drags it off to his lair before they save the children. And that shot was cut in. I think it was shot, but it was not used because the intensity of the scene was so much that it did not need to drag on or be that much more horrific. It was totally well contained, just to have Stan Winston's head coming in and the CG stuff of the dinosaur, trying to get up the underbelly of the car. And so all that level of jeopardy. One of the things that they did that was interesting, when the first answer prints came out, Kathy Kennedy invited Dennis and I down to ILM, or to Amblin, to their screening room, and the three of us watched the movie. And at the end of it, Kathy turned to me and said, "What do you think?" And I went like, "It's not terrible." And she said, "That's exactly what I thought." It was like, you just don't know when you're working on these things how it's all gonna, come together when all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and it was just like, yeah, this is, nobody in a million years imagined it was gonna make $1 billion, but it was like, we worked on this, another like really amazing thing, so it's very mercurial and kind of shocking, to,
Is that the reaction you're always hoping for, that it's not terrible, because you fear that,
no, you always figure it's going to be terrible.
yeah.
Just like kind of leave yourself that space, like the ship is going to go down, and I'll figure out how to move on. But yeah, then all of a sudden, if you end up on a tropical paradise, in your lifeboat, then that's preferable.
Great. I want to talk really quickly about another very intense and memorable scene from the film, which is, of course, the Raptors in the kitchen. That scene can still shred your nerves when you're watching a film or watching it again. Just there's so much, especially just integrating the CG and the human actors, the shooting in cramped quarters, and the pots and pans flying everywhere. Can you the intense mayhem in very close quarters in this scene? Can you just talk about how a sequence like that even comes together? I mean, because
that was really well rehearsed.
Yeah.
Stephen and Kathy really wanted to have a very fleshed out pre-visualization or animatics, and at that time computers weren't set up to do that. So I created the Raptor kitchen and the Tyrannosaurus paddock as some very simple, kind of blocky stop motion shots that built the sequences that John Bell had storyboarded for Stephen, and so we made that movie. And today, if you took those animatics or pre-visualizations and run it along with the soundtrack, it's amazing how it kind of syncs up. And it was very important for Stephen to move really quickly during that movie for a number of reasons. There were kids were in the scenes, and so it was very important to show here's what the scene is, not just in a two-dimensional storyboard, but this is like the raptor turns and he looks at you and you go like ah, and so the kids viscerally get that. But he also wanted to be able to swap and trade, and to see if, as he's seeing how his day went, if he can lose a shot and that he could put that money into another shot, or things like that. He was very careful at the beginning. He had the crew gather at the beginning of the show and said, "I'm going to shoot this like a Clint Eastwood movie. So I'm not doing more than 2 takes." Oh. So everybody's got to be on game and just do their point, because he and Kathy knew that they didn't have the money in the budget to do the visual effects work at ILM and at my studio, which was like about $5 million. And so they shot really quickly and came 2 or 3 weeks in under the projected production schedule. And that money that was left over was the money that was used to do the visual effects. So they're very savvy in that regard.
And I think that savvy really comes through as you watch the movie. That economy of means in terms of the technology and even just the storytelling, which is very streamlined. It doesn't feel like overkill, and the dinosaurs are very sparingly deployed. I think, and I think Spielberg is just obviously very good at maximizing his resources, and and of course, I think some of the sequels have not been as effective because of losing that sense of scale. Do you think that, I don't know, do you think that kind of more is more mentality has been detrimental to creativity in Hollywood filmmaking since then? Because it really feels like a model.
So, I mean, but for things like this, I mean, or RoboCop or Starship Troopers or Star Wars, going into it, you're inventing stuff. You don't know the territory that you're in, as opposed to a franchise where there are so many obligations that you must meet, that the amount of invention that you're allowed to do is very minimal. I mean, you've got your Raptor characters and they do what the Raptor characters do. But, when you are creating it out of whole cloth, you don't know. I mean, you just have to kind of find it by whatever means you can. And, one of the ways that we were able to do that in Jurassic Park was Kathy and Stephen. What was really important for me was really early on, we created not only the animatics, but what we call the Dinosaur Bible, using stop motion puppets based on Stan Winston's characters, and animated some different behavioral scenes and footfall patterns and walking and running cycles. And for some of the behavioral stuff, we would use that. I would go down to Stan Winston's studio and work with John Rosengrant, who was involved with building and performing in the Raptor costume, and work out how all of the Winston shots were going to cut with the computer graphic shots. So there was continuity with all of that stuff. And then production paid for me to go into and work with Gary Rydstrom for a week or two and take that Dinosaur Bible. And what was really important for me early on and for the whole production was to have the voices of the two pivotal set pieces, the Raptor kitchen and the Tyrannosaurus paddock, to have the right voices. So you do like what you would normally do in a animated features. You would have Vincent Price come in and you would do his performance and you would animate to that. And it was very important for me that we just didn't have the dinosaurs open their mouths as we imagined them. We really needed to feel the attack and decay of whatever it was, the symphony of blended noises of however many different tracks Gary Rydstrom used to create the volume and the space that the Tyrannosaurus's roar. And and it was really important to I think you see it in the subsequent things. There's not very many things for a dinosaur to do except to roar. And they can't smoke cigarettes or push a broom or drink coffee or anything. So where the dinosaurs roared was important. And now they roar all the time, but the drama that was created, the roar is the exclamation point to the scene. It's not what the scene is about. It's the focus of the drama at the end of the thing. It's what you build to. It's not what you have going on all the time. Which is dull.
This has been so great. I want to go to we have, I think, 2 reader questions from some of our readers who've been following the conversation, and I wanted to ask them of you. One of them is from Twitter user Engineer27. Their question is, will we ever see movie dinosaurs with feathers like they actually had? And of course, the knowledge of what dinosaurs looked like and what they were structurally has, of course, changed a lot since Jurassic Park. What do you think of this?
Yeah, sure. At some point, somebody will do that. I don't think or I doubt. I don't know what's really going on for the subsequent Jurassic Parks, but the Raptors and T-Rex are so iconic as characters. I seriously doubt they're going to change into something significantly different. But I think it's been some stuff that was made for TV that are reconstructions of things that are, pretty interesting with, plumage on certain, raptor type animals, and they would be pretty hallucinogenic, really interesting characters to have that. I mean, although I've seen some reconstructions of the Tyrannosaur, and it has like this really downy fur on it, kind of like a baby duck, and it just looks stupid. It does not look at all threatening. So I don't think dramatically they would do that. Although I was working on some stuff for a unrelated project, and there was some really interesting, kind of almost like reggae hair type, almost braided quills and feathers coming off the top of a theropod dinosaur that looked really quite cool.
Wow.
So yeah, there's stuff you could do.
Movies can change the public's perception of what, and how they really were. Our other question is from Mattia Guidarelli. How did your knowledge of stop motion and classical animation help improve the computer animations besides the input device on the film? And do you see such knowledge missing in modern computer animation? So in which way?
Well, yeah, I was never really, I was self-taught. I was not ever, book learned or went to school to do this stuff. So I kind of like felt my way through it. So it was just all very intuitive about like what felt right for the weight and the mass, and how the character took in the world through its eyes and processed it in its brain, and then spit out its intention through its eyes and behavior. And so all of that is just kind of constructed bit by bit by bit, as Stanislavski would say. It's just like you don't know what you're getting into until you start building, and you lay a brick, and then you lay another brick, and you just start building this thing, and you make a lot of mistakes, and a lot of times those mistakes inform what you're going to do next. It's like, actually, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a stupid idea. It was actually kind of something you would never thought of before. So you just have to stay like very flexible and continually make adjustments all the time. And so all that's transferable over from stop motion work into computer graphics work. On Starship Troopers, well, even on Jurassic Park, we were working with some of the scenes were shot with ILM's animators, and they had all been educated in Canada because we didn't have any schools in the United States for computer graphics guys. And so I had to work with them. They'd been schooled in the Disney so-called, classical animation style of squash and stretch and all of that kind of stuff, which is very cartoony. But when you're dealing in this kind of a milieu with, Earth-specific gravity and light that's coming from the sun and all that, it's a totally different animal. So you got to be really careful about how you go about staging stuff. And it's really no different than doing stop motion animation either. But one of the things we had to do was, because we didn't have the skill set in the computer graphics world of doing believable characters, we had to create a very elaborate system that we ended up calling the Dinosaur input device, which was essentially a stop motion animation armature that was fitted out with encoders, and that would be manipulated. And as you move the puppet head on the armature, the wire frame in the computer would move. And so all those scenes were built stop motion animators that knew about how to deliver a character in weight and mass and intentionality that the computer graphics guys have not quite yet come up to speed with. So, yeah, you know, I mean, so much attention went into that stuff and thought that and design that I don't think goes into a lot of movies today, particularly if it's a franchise. The franchise require that it be like whatever it was before, so you're just aping that somehow, and there's not a lot of that kind of like, oh God, what are we gonna do now? Well, it's like, oh, you're gonna make the Raptor look like the Raptors, you know, in the last movie. So, yeah.
Sure. What you said about the difference between a first time, you know, where you're just freely inventing versus a franchise and replicating what came before is, I think, just so applicable to it just says so much about the state of Hollywood filmmaking. And, you know, with stop motion animation too, it's such a wonderful and underappreciated medium. And I know it's so difficult, it's so painstaking. The frame by frame process takes so much time. There's some studios that do still invest in it, like Leica and Aardman. But what is your sense of just its? And I know you've touched on this, but you know, in terms of integrating it into different media. But do you think it will? Is there going to be a resurgence, a renaissance? Is there a chance of that, or is it? Where are we at with stop motion? I think
it depends on you know whether those movies make money, and they haven't made money. You know, I think the guys up at Leica, you know, have a $1 billion dad that can keep dumping money into the thing, so they don't have to make money. So that will probably, but it's you know, it's pretty much considered to be these days, you know, kind of like the Tim Burton stuff, kind of like you know, dark kids tale type things. I know Guillermo del Toro is doing Pinocchio, which with stop motion, which unfortunately has been shut down. But you know, I'm really looking forward to that as a different kind of a macabre take on it. I mean, I've had this idea that it started off as an experimental film that I'm almost finished with, and it's taken me almost 30 years to do. And it's probably 80% stop motion. It's called Mad God.
Right.
And Alamo Drafthouse is going to release it theatrically if there are ever any more theatrical releases, or you know, maybe Netflix is going to pick it up. But you know, there's a, you know, I'm like kind of interested in keeping the craft alive, you know, and because I like doing it, and I like being in the shop, and I like working with tools and working with people. And there's a kind of a knock-on effect that the Mad God project has had. Like if I go and give a talk in Germany or at the PFA in Berkeley, students will come up and say, "Oh, hey, can I come and work on your Mad God project?" And so, you know, I've created a space where they can come in on the weekends, and you know, during the week, I'll figure out how to do what they will need to do, so they can do a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of like fiddly work. And so I can get as many as like 15 or 20 people in there on a weekend, you know, helping me do a lot of stuff like really quickly, which is really helpful. And then they get to be exposed to the whole production project process. So it's kind of kicking the whole mentoring thing downstream, you know, and just or upstream, you know, and you know, allowing, you know, younger people that are interested in this stuff to get exposed to it.
And am I wrong, Phil? Are we able to see some excerpts of the Mad God project shorts? Or
Well,
are those available?
I produced the first 3 episodes on Kickstarter, using Kickstarter funds. So, you know, then there are trailers. If you go to philtippett.com, you can see trailers for it, and you can buy a, you know, DVD of it, and of the first 3 episodes. And then I stopped doing Kickstarters because they were really too cumbersome to continue doing. So I found some people that would give me completion funds to finish the thing. So I'm almost done. I'll be done by the end of the year, and hopefully it will get its release in 2021. If we're not, I'll.
Well, we can't wait to see that, and something very much to look forward to when this is all over. Thank you, Phil, and thank you to our LA Times readers for voting on these summer movies, for voting for Jurassic Park and watching it again and sharing your great questions. I want to give everyone a quick preview of what's ahead for next week before we say goodbye to Phil. We did a special double week edition of the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown to make up for some lost time and also to observe the 45th anniversary of Jaws, the movie that is, of course, the foundation of this whole series. And so we had 32 films this week instead of the usual 16. Let's take a look at week 7. This week gave us movies like Grease, Dick Tracy, The Cable Guy, Batman Begins, Toy Story 3. It's quite a list of films, and the race ultimately came down to 2 movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark and the original animated The Lion King. Both films had their fans, but the voting was not close. The winner was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now we look ahead to week 8, which we also did this week, of course. Arguably an even more impressive batch of films, which included Superman 2, The Thing, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Minority Report, Inside Out, the original Fast and the Furious, and Sleepless in Seattle, and our 2 final contenders, Jaws and Blade Runner. And once again, the voting was not close. Blade Runner is a masterpiece. Alas, it was no match for another masterpiece, Jaws, which of course was destined to win this week. Will it be the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown? Ultimate Summer Movie, we'll see when the showdown reaches its finale 8 weeks from now. We still have a lot of movies and a lot of weeks to go, so please hang in there with us. And once more, Phil, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure talking to you about your great work, not just on Jurassic Park, but on so many films as well. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your insights, and wish you all the best during this crazy time.
All right, well, my pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Have me back for Starship Troopers. That's a fun movie to talk about. And
I wish it were a summer. I wish it were a summer movie. I think it was released in toward the end of the year. If not, I would love to. But we'll try to make an exception of some kind and have you back to talk about.
Okay,
that.
sounds good.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.